Hello and welcome to the SOFEA Sessions podcast. This month's episode is with SOFEA's lovely kitchen magician, Alex Mackay. Yes, that is his actual job title. Alex is a cook, a teacher, a writer and a food lover who joined the SOFEA family last year after 5 long years of planning, commitment and dedication. This episode covers everything from Alex's incredible career, sliding door moments, the importance of collaboration and connection, and how working with SOFEA's young people is encouraging him to work in different ways. Just a quick heads up, there is some strong language in today's episode, and a reminder that any views discussed are personal views and not directly linked to SOFEA as an organisation. Hi Alex.
Hiya.
Welcome to the SOFEA Sessions podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. How are you today?
I'm really good, yeah, really good. Looking forward to this.
Good, yeah, it's good to have you here. I finally roped you in.
Yeah. Well, it takes a bit to drag me away from the kitchen these days.
Oh, well, let's hope it's a meaningful use of your time anyway. We're certainly glad to have you on the podcast, so thank you.
Thank you, it's lovely to be here.
So let's start with maybe telling the listeners who you are and what you do.
Okay, well, I'm Alex Mackay, and by trade, I'm a chef. At SOFEA, I'm known as the kitchen wizard. So what I do here is I rescue food that's going to be perhaps thrown away, and I use it to train people to feed people.
Fantastic. And why do you do what you do? Why are you a kitchen wizard at SOFEA?
Well, it's a very long journey that got me here, and I feel like everything I've done so far in my career has sort of led me to have the ability to do what I do here, because I have to wear a lot of different hats here. It's a fascinating thing in terms of how I do it, but it's also incredibly inspiring.
So it's a long pathway, perhaps. How about we start somewhere in the early days, some of the things that you've kind of achieved over your career that have led you to be at SOFEA?
Okay, well, I mean, what started me off cooking was I was at school when I was 15 and I wasn't particularly academic, and I liked playing football and I liked going surfing, and I didn't often turn up at school when I didn't feel like it. But I'd always liked working. And since I was 9, I had had an after-school job of some sort or another. And at the time I was doing a milk run. And my boss said to me, well, you know, if you're not going to go to school, why don't you try and get a job in a kitchen? And I sort of shrugged my shoulders. Oh, okay. And I got 3 different jobs washing dishes, and it went from there. Then one job went on to an apprenticeship. Then I did a year of that. Then I got offered a better job. And so I broke off my apprenticeship and put myself through the rest of college on my days off. And then when I was 19, I bought a one-way ticket to France, and I've been away ever since. In those days, France was really the epicenter of everything. Mm-hmm. Sort of haute cuisine or fine cooking wasn't as sort of global as it is now. I think these days you'd probably go to New York or somewhere in Scandinavia, perhaps Spain. But I still love France. I'm a real francophile.
Yeah, fantastic. So 19 years old, one-way plane ticket to France. What was that like when you got there?
Terrifying, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I was, I had that glorious arrogance of youth, but I hadn't really thought it through that much. So the one thing I knew, that I had this possibility that I could go somewhere in a place called Besançon, where I could do a month's language course. My mum had put me in touch with some New Zealanders who helped young professionals in Paris. But when I got there, I didn't know anything about the underground system, for example. And so I was looking at the front of the trains. Because I remember I came from New Zealand, which is, the whole of New Zealand would probably be half the population of Paris. At the time, I think it was 3 million in New Zealand. Now it's about 4.5, I believe. And it was just so different. So the funny thing about that, on that first trip, trying to get the metro, so the underground, to where I was staying, is that I got so confused that I ended up coming out and getting a taxi to the youth hostel. And I remember I'd been saving for about a year. I had very little savings. The other thing was I had one of those moments, like a sliding door moment, because I had this black satchel in which there were the traveller's checks, which I'm not even sure if exist anymore. My traveller's checks, my passport, everything basically. And I was confused, and I had this massive green backpack. I looked like some sort of oversized turtle. I was getting on the underground, and I heard someone go, Monsieur, sir. And I turned around, and there was this guy holding up my satchel. And I just left it on a seat and got on the train.
Wow.
And so I got off the train. He gave me my satchel. I think it was at that point, if I remember correctly, that I thought, okay, stop, and go up and get a taxi. And possibly if I'd lost that, because I also had all my cash in there, possibly if I'd lost that, I would have thought, this is not for me. And I would have ended up going back to New Zealand. And as it was, France, I did three two-star Michelin restaurants in France. And then I ended up coming to England for the Manuel Casaison in Oxfordshire, which is where I'd applied to from New Zealand originally, but been turned down.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
It's quite ironic to me as well that the sliding doors moment happened on the metro in Paris, in France, And actually that one act of a kind stranger could have potentially changed the course or the direction in which you were going in.
Well, everything, my life,
wow.
My kids.
Yeah.
I met my ex-wife at the Manoir. And so if I hadn't been here, I wouldn't have these amazing children. It's just so many things. And they talk about random acts of kindness.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm surprised, like you do something where you feel like you're saying hello and smiling at someone, and how big a deal it can be and how much of a difference it can make just to notice someone. But and I guess that's kind of in me anyway, but this particular moment, which would have been totally and utterly, I wouldn't have known what to do. I didn't have very much French. I remember I had a money belt, so perhaps I had cash in there too, but it was very uncomfortable, so maybe I just unwrapped it and put it in the thing. I didn't know anyone, it wasn't like I had a sort of family friend I could go and stay with or anything like that. So yeah, that was funny enough, until just now, I hadn't thought about that for years.
So your time in Paris as a 19-year-old, and how long did you spend in France?
At that stage, I spent about 3 years.
Okay.
So I didn't stay in Paris for very long. I stayed in Paris there for about 2 days.
Oh, okay.
And then I went to Besançon, which was this place that I knew that they did these language courses, which were sort of immersive for about a month. And I had saved up enough money to be able to do that. I didn't have to start working straight away. But I remember I then got to Besançon and I got confused about the train, because I was trying to get to the Gare de Lyon. And I was in the metro system, but I thought the metro system was the same thing as the train. It's just all this stuff, because it's got the same name, And then I remember I got on the train and I didn't understand the TGV, and I didn't understand that I needed a reservation. So I ended up being fined by the inspector. And I got to Besançon. I got into a hotel that I read about in a Lexico guide. And I got there, and it was more expensive than it was meant to be. And I remember I had this sort of thing they talk about, that culture shock. I stayed in my room for 2 days. I couldn't go out. I just couldn't go out and do anything. And then I did. And then I eventually got to the place of the language course, and one was starting straight away, and they set up somewhere for you to stay. And again, that was that wonderful piece of something happening at the right time that made things a lot easier. And during that time, so that was a month, I got this contact at a restaurant in Burgundy, which was a 2-star Michelin, and I went there for what I thought was an interview, and they said, okay, we'll just start today. I was like, oh, okay, but I have to go back and then sort of come back. And then, see, here I haven't even got past 19. I'm going to be taking you on forever. So, but there was something interesting about that too, because again, I couldn't find somewhere to live. And so I was staying in a hotel, but the hotel closed at 10:30 at night. Oh. And so we would start work at 7 or 8 in the morning, and we would have a little break in the afternoon. Then we would finish somewhere around midnight. And so to get into my room, I had to climb over this wall at the back.
Oh my God.
I know, it's just, thinking back that far, you don't necessarily get an opportunity to do it. So then I stayed in France for 3 years at that stage. I went to the Manoir for the first time, and then I went to Germany, because my girlfriend was German at the time, then to Bermuda. And while I was in Bermuda, Raymond Blanc got in touch with me and asked me to come back and take over the cookery school and start up a publishing consultancy department, which is how I ended up doing the sorts of things I do now. And he said, because I'd been easily bored in my life and I wouldn't stay anywhere particularly long. And he said that I had to stay 3 years, and I told him I'd stay exactly 3 years. And that gave me a sort of a deadline to say, what am I going to do? What am I going to do next? So during that time, I was working on one of his books, and I met this photographer, Peter Knabb, who's now sort of like my English dad, and his wife, Diana Knabb. And so we worked on the photography together. And one night we'd had a particularly good day shooting, and we went out to Ronnie Scott's in London, the jazz club. And I remember there was this amazing Brazilian combo, just extraordinary, like so many instruments and just so much buzz. we were sort of talking, it was at 2 or 3 in the morning. They had this amazing property in France, in the south of France, which I'd always loved the food of the south of France. And so by the end of the night, we decided we were going to set up a cookery school out there at the end of my contract with the Manoir. And it still seemed like a good idea the next morning.
It must be a good idea.
9 months later, Le Bal d'Enfer cookery school opened in the south of France, which led to a television series out there and my first book, and also to meeting Delia Smith, who's one of their best friends. And in fact, they worked with her when she was a hairdresser.
Wow.
And
so much history there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so through meeting her, I then, with her, we set up these cookery workshops at the football club in Norwich, which I still do to this day, 20-something years later. And sort of everything else in between. So SOFEA came about through Bernard, who, what's Bernard's official title here?
He was Chair of Trustees.
Chair of Trustees, yeah. Wonderful man. And he was a rugby dad. We were talking on the sidelines, and he introduced me to Richard, and this was about 5 or 6 years ago in October. And I remember I came here, and it was all about the pumpkins at that stage. But there's these pumpkins everywhere, and he talked about wanting to have a kitchen that we could cook them and make soup, that kind of thing. And so we talked about it for a long time, and of course COVID got in the way of things for a while too. And then, so a year and a half ago or so, I think, Kerry, the sort of fireball that is Kerry, came on board, and it all kind of started to happen. And now I just feel like it's the most extraordinary place, and there's always something new that I see every time I come here, and I just love it. I absolutely love it.
Amazing. It's quite a journey you've had, and something that strikes me is that you've met so many different and wonderful professionals over your life, but you've also it sounds like you've really invested in the community element of it. So with the cooking schools and that kind of thing, and teaching people not just about the food. It's from knowing you always say it's so much more than just the food. It's about eating together and the magic that happens when you cook and you eat together. So I was just kind of curious more about the cooking schools that you did and what you get from that as an individual.
Okay, so the cooking schools that I've done mostly are very different than this. Like, this sort of, I started doing it at the Manoir, and it's very expensive and high end, and, using the most incredible ingredients. And when I started doing it, I was a very chefy chef. Mm-hmm. So everything had to be a real certain way, and everything, was very technical. And there was a point at which I can't quite remember how this came to be, but I realized that I wasn't showing people, I was showing off.
Oh, interesting.
And that was, so I wasn't really teaching. I was just going, hey, I can do all this. You probably won't be able to do it as well. So I then, and it was this wonderful couple, actually, Doug and Ruth, who were regular customers at the Manoir, and they followed me out to the south of France, and they came every year with some other people they'd met through the cookery schools, and they booked the place for the whole week.
Wow.
Amazing. Just really, really wonderful. But they came along, and she called me the great enabler. And that really helped me in terms of realizing that success wasn't anymore like I was working at the sort of level in kitchens where everything was about what was on the plate at the end when it went out over the pass. And that's when you hear these stories about, how sort of angry places kitchen can be, or how you work these extraordinary long hours. All of that I did, and I would never change it. I wouldn't change it a bit. Because you imagine, so I get to France when I'm 19. By the time I'm 21, I'm sous chef at the Manoir. And I do that, and I'm able to do that because every single working day that I did was about 16 hours. But you're not like sort of doing a little bit and taking a break or having a chat or that sort of thing. You're running the whole time. And you're working at such a high technical level. It's amazing to be part of. It's extraordinary. I don't think you can necessarily maintain it, but it was so incredible to be part of. And if you realize that you're effectively doing 3 or 4 working days each day.
Yeah, in terms of the amount that you're getting
done. The amount you're getting
effort,
done.
Yeah.
Exactly. All of that. But at the same time, you're learning that much. And, like in holidays, we go to other places, like I went to Italy and worked in a 3-star Michelin in Florence, and another one in, Caneto Saloglio. And, you do that in your holidays because you want to learn more and learn about things different ways. You're also kind of setting up in your mind, where you're going to go next, what you're going to do next, and how, far forward you're going to go. And for me, that sort of thing that when people talk about balance, I have a very different relationship with balance than most people because I look for satisfaction as well, and I think that's really, really important. But you learn so much in that time. And, it's just so exciting to be working at that level. Like, I don't know that there's another feeling that I've ever felt that when you're on the pass at a 2-star Michelin restaurant and it goes really well. It is incredible. And like, at the moment we did a lot of covers, in those days, and everything used to go from the main kitchen. And there was a la carte, there was set menus. These days it's all set menus. Like, I look back at some of the things we did. It was just so exciting. It's incredible. But I didn't actually do it for very long. So because that call from RB when I was in Bermuda changed the idea of what I was going to do, which is how I went into the cookery schools.
Okay.
And so moving on from Le Manoir, I then had the one at the Belle d'Enfer, which was amazing. It was absolutely, we were in the mountains, this beautiful old farmhouse surrounded by vines, a swimming pool, and the kitchen there was Peter's old photographic studio. So it was all glass fronted, completely beautiful, lovely high ceilings, stone floors, and we set it up for a maximum of 7 people. So it was a really good size. And then, because he, light is his thing, so we had muslin curtains on the inside and big canvas curtains on the outside that would reflect the sun. And so, for example, when we'd have a lovely lunch of the most extraordinarily flavoured ingredients, we'd then, I get my assistant to churn some sorbet and close all of the curtains and turn the air conditioning on. And so when the clients would come back in, it would be like going underwater. It was extraordinary.
So it's
because everyone would be, I don't want to go back to the kitchen, I want to go to the pool, all that sort of thing. But they'd just go in there. And then I'd always have something to do for them, like kneading bread or something a bit physical in the afternoon. And then, and so that was extraordinary. But that definitely wasn't a community thing. The community stuff happened in 2006 or so. I won an award for my writing. I won the Guild of Food Writers Cookery Journalist of the Year. And at that awards, there's a wonderful one called Fiona who ran the kids' cookery school in Acton. And she asked me to come on board and be a patron. And so there I started. I didn't go that often, but I would go a couple of times a year. I do fundraising stuff for them. And I always used to wear their brandings at other events so that, to raise attention. But I would be involved with groups of basically kids who, a lot like some of the situations some of the kids at SOFEA are in, who are basically being excluded from education. And I remember a real thing that hit me. Like, I'd look over and go, oh, well done, mate. And they'd jolt back as if in shock. Because that was so unfamiliar to them.
Yeah,
so
they hadn't had that affirmation before. Or,
that kind of thing. And it was clearly like I was speaking another language. And then I remember another one that really affected me was a group of young carers. And there was this girl, but she would have been 13 or 14. And right at the end, because the sorts of things that I did there, it was fun. And like this time we'd made fresh pasta. And so pasta everywhere. We'd done a lovely long piece of pasta. And at the end I had all these trimmings. And I was about to just scrunch them back into a ball. She said, oh, what's going to happen with that? And I said, I was just going to scrunch it back in the ball, probably freeze it, maybe use it next time. She said, oh, can I have it? And I just sort of felt, her calculating, oh, if I take that, I've got some extra. So maybe I've got enough for, 2 portions or 3 portions or, whatever it was we sent her home with, a bit more than that. So she had enough for tonight. And I just remember this, she seemed older than me. So, of course, I found her some other stuff and just made sure she went home with a great bag full. And, that kind of, I guess that was my first step on the road to SOFEA in lots of ways. Because all of that, unfortunately, like Fiona, I don't know how many kids she had through, but tens of thousands. And
That's
it was her,
numbers.
basically, yeah, absolutely. And she also taught me that you can't necessarily deal with everything that's going on outside in their lives, and that's not what you want to do while you're here. What you want to do is fully focus on their time while they're here and try and get them going with some life skills, all of that, try and teach them a bit of hygiene, all of that, but give them some fun, and also we'd have groups of kids with autism, so I had to learn to slow down, and I learned so much there, in really quite a small amount of time. It was, so I don't know, about a decade and a half that I was involved before COVID, because unfortunately they didn't make it through COVID. But no, so that was really, really amazing. And then during COVID, there was, I nearly went to a job right at the beginning of COVID. It was at Marcham College at the WI, and we were going backwards and forwards, and we didn't really know, and I kind of had this cough, and I thought that one of my sons sort of kind of had this cough, but I'd come back from Norwich like a couple of days before, and I remember someone coughing on the train. It was kind of like a machine gun, and that was a sort of precursor to it all. And then at some point during that day, I said, look, no, I'm just not going to do it. I remember I had all the ingredients, like, hundreds of pounds worth of ingredients, and it was all set up to go. And the people were set up to come and say, I'm going to a situation where 60 to 80-year-old people, I might be putting them in danger. We didn't really know anything about it. So I just kind of said, stop. And then not long after that, I don't know if you remember that nurse who was on the telly who, she tried to go shopping after a shift and there was nothing in the shops. And then after that, I thought, I can do something. Because I lost all my work as well. That was the other thing. All of my work, just went.
Yeah,
it was all
just
the types
completely
of things.
evaporated.
Exactly, yeah. Evaporated is a great word. And so I thought, I can do something about this. So I got going, and I started by a nurse I know works at the Radcliffe, Carolyn Barrett. She suggested, because her sister works in a care home, she said, well, look, we're getting a lot of attention at the moment, because at that stage, like, there was so much, and mostly Easter eggs and bananas, but, so much going. And I thought, well, I know the sort of things I can do, and I can do nutritional stuff that can be frozen, can be heated up in a microwave really quickly, and is filling and really, really tasty. Like, I'm going to treat it like every dish I ever treated at any of the fine restaurants I worked at. It's going to have that same level of care. It won't have the most expensive ingredients, of course, but it'll have the same level of care. So I started by just using my own money, and then eventually I started fundraising. And during that period of 2 or so years, I did about 8,500 meals out of my little galley kitchen at home.
Wow, that's incredible.
And during the last bit of that, so I don't know, last year or so of that, I was back talking to Richard and eventually talking to Kerry about coming here. So it's like I'm like a sort of shuffled up mixture of all of these different things.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I can do what I do here, because something that has surprised me is I don't think I'm a particularly patient person, but I've managed to do that here in the kitchen with the kids. Outside of the kitchen, not always so much.
I was going to say that's a really interesting reflection, because when you from an outside perspective, you're so patient with them, and these are young people that some of them have never even picked up a knife or chopped a vegetable. Their skills are really, beginner level, but the patience you have with them is incredible. And obviously, the young people we work with, they are coming from huge variety of backgrounds. Some of them have really complex trauma, some of them are autistic, some of them have ADHD, and we always talk about differentiation at SOFEA, and how the reason why we're different is because we treat each individual as they come to us. So we meet them where they're at and accept them as they are, and you can see that in the kitchen. And it amazes me because you talk about your early career and how much of a sort of systematic, precise operation that was, where everything's got to be, following a process, right? But taking that knowledge and then being able to kind of put it into the kitchen with the kids, who all need very different approaches. It just amazes me that you've gone from really one extreme to another, and they're loving it. They're absolutely loving it. And I think just the joy that you say, you're putting the same amount of care into it is just amazing to see.
That's interesting for me to hear, because you're talking about treating everyone individually. The way that I make it work for me, I think, is I basically treat everyone the same. I just think, look, we've got a job to do here, because the thing that I have to get across to them, no matter what, even if it's not perfect, because it never is, we're going to have 100 portions of food ready to go on that pass at 12:30 on Thursday, as it is at the moment.
Yeah.
So it just has to happen, and so we make it happen in all sorts of different ways. But I think that consistency is very, very important. I think that keeping going is very, very important.
Yeah.
I think that, because I wasn't quite prepared for the fact that I might end up with a completely different group of kids one afternoon to the other, and then I might end up with no one, and, all that sort of thing. I did set it up with the rest of my life so that on the prep day, I can be here until very late. So if necessary, I can do it all myself, like I did with my Cook for Carers stuff. But there's always something, there's always a thing. Like, I'm also sometimes very humbled. I was last week with one of the students who has cerebral palsy. And another one of the students was moaning about his back. And so I started moaning about all my middle-age complaints. And I said, Josh, what about you, mate? What about you? And he said, oh, I've got cerebral palsy, and I've got this, and I've got that, and I've got the other. And I said, all right, you win. And but I was just realizing how I had sort of noticed, but he was veering towards doing clearing up and stuff like that, and saying, oh, I actually like this bit best. And I realized then that that's because he could do that autonomously.
Mm.
And so I kind of pulled him back from that and just keep him trying to find the ways. But things like when we're trying to chop up a pepper, like holding the pepper with your non-dominant hand is something we take for granted. But he can't do that. And so we tried with a knife, but that seemed really dangerous. Like, we might slide his hand down the knife. So we tried with a pair of scissors, going like that. We tried with me doing it. But then there comes a point when things just have to get done. And I think that's a good thing for the kids to see too.
100%, yeah. And I think, you kind of hit the nail on the head there, where you said at the end of the day, it's got to get done. And that's teaching them really good skills for work. But I think, and just life, right? But I think the interesting thing is that you can say that whatever happens within that process, it still gets done. And that's the nice part. And, I've overheard conversations that you've had with, Charlie and Freya and whoever else. And actually the feedback we've had from the young people is that you take the time to talk to them as well. So you have time to get to know them whilst you're getting the job done, which is nice.
Yeah.
Particularly, CJ, for example, they're autistic. And just kind of asking questions around how that is for them in the kitchen is amazing. And they came out last week and they said, guess who didn't wear their headphones in the kitchen? And I was like, you. And they was like, yes, it was me. I didn't wear my headphones. And for CJ, their headphones are such an essential for blocking that sensory overload. But for whatever reason, they didn't feel that they needed them on that day. And that's just amazing for them. So it's all those little bits that I like to call them moments. Yeah. And obviously, when you step back, you can really see the moments that happen. But you have to step back to see them.
Yeah, no, I can
and that's
can
difficult
see that.
In your position, isn't it? Because you've got the job to do. But it's nice, I think this is why I'm reflecting it back to you. Other people can see those moments happen and reflect them back to you as well.
No, look, I think that's great because, there is just the simple fact that to make this work, I have to keep my head down. I just have to go for it, because also I can't really plan like I usually would because I'm not... the guys in the warehouse, Grant and Andy, are absolutely fantastic, and the team, and they give me a lot of leeway, but they don't know what's coming in.
Yeah, that's true because it's all surplus food, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I do plan ahead. Like if I see something, I grab it. When I can freeze something, I can. They keep me in touch with the stuff that I'm saying. I'm thinking about doing this kind of thing next week, but it's a very inexact science. It's not like ordering. Right, I've got 100 steaks and 100 portions of potatoes and 100 portions of salad. It's not like that at all. And that's part of its challenge. That's fun, but it also makes it more time consuming. What's quite funny is now, like, seasons don't mean anything to me. The seasons are what's in the warehouse. And I remember when I first went on the computerized system that we have here, Gladys, and I looked at it and there was Spider-Man cakes on there. And last week I saw 2 of them in the warehouse and I thought, so they weren't joking, so I haven't used the Spider-Man cakes or anything yet. So that side of it's really challenging. But it's interesting, going back to CJ, they did a canapé evening with me before the kitchen was finished, and they were feeling overwhelmed by all the people and passing the canapés around. But then they came back into the kitchen and they said to me, I feel safe here. And that was really, really wonderful. And that's something you're talking about, those moments, is something that I'm learning as I go along now, that we definitely can't achieve everything all the time in a large way, or even necessarily in a permanent way. Like, I think I've got somewhere, or I think I've got to a certain point, and then the next week it's totally different. And that's part of being human, of course. But it's looking, and that helps me with my life, and it helps me with my relationship with my children as well. And the thing that I have learned, I think this is maybe in the last 15 years, yes, when I was 37 it was a thing, is to really value collaboration and to learn what I can off other people. And you've been a great example of that, Nikki. I mean, you've been fantastic. And I feel, I was talking to your mum about it the other day, actually, and I feel it's quite amazing sort of having as a sort of hero figure, someone who's young enough to be your daughter. But there's, I don't know that people value this highly enough. When I was at my first job in France, okay, I was 19, like I said, it was terrifying. I'd been in New Zealand at jobs that you do 8 hours a day, you got paid overtime, and I always did overtime. So I was used to doing hours, but not this kind of hours. And 6 days a week, anything between sort of 15 and 19 hours a day in another language, in a massive kitchen, in a system that you had, like, the orders would be called out, one foie gras, one sea bass, one this, one that, one the other. And everyone had to answer, oui, chef, in unison. Otherwise, you got a horrendous bollocking. So I would wake up in the middle of the night, oui, chef, like this, jolting myself awake, and kind of no idea where I was, all that sort of thing. It was utterly terrifying.
That sounds really terrifying.
It was just such a different thing. It was such a different sort of process to make. You have this incredible talent as a thing. Like, when you ask, how are you? I've never really felt, most of the time when people ask, how are you, they really want to know. But you really, really do. And when I was in that kitchen that I'm talking about, the one thing that I had to hang on to is I was started in the pastry. So I would be there with the pastry chef before anyone else. Everyone who came into the kitchen would come over to us, look us in the eye and shake our hands and say bonjour. And that might be it, for the whole day, except to shout at you. But that would be, you'd get that. And that was so important. And sometimes that was what got me through. It's that sort of greeting and that. And I can't underestimate the importance of that. And it's a bit of a shame because I'm not quite sure what to do now for all sorts of different reasons. Like, I like hugging people, but I don't feel right doing that anymore. Because of COVID, because of, Me Too, because of, all the reasons. The fist bump seems to be quite a good thing. Yeah. But then I feel like I'm being a bit silly, like I'm trying to be a bit sort of youth. But I think the greeting thing, the recognizing you're here, I've come to a place that you are, is really, really important. And yeah, like I say, I haven't thought about that for a really long time, but that really got me through. And sometimes people find that unusual, the sort of the shaking of a hand when you've already met someone. But I think it's vital in life.
I think it's the connection as well, isn't it? Like, we have so many different connections, whether that be, and communication as well. You've got verbal communication, but I think being able to have the mindset where you can almost come up and see this, like, I always call it like a helicopter view, and be able to see those micro forms of communication. So for CJ, them taking their headphones off in the kitchen, that is their way of communicating to you, I am safe here. I feel safe here. Right. So it's those tiny things. And like you say, the handshake. I noticed you shake everybody's hand here at SOFEA when you come in the morning. And it's just taking that time, whether that be consciously or subconsciously, to go, I'm going to take a couple of seconds to be fully present in this moment with you. And I think it's so easy to lose that. Yeah. So easy to lose that because, SOFEA is constantly growing. There's emerging needs coming up every day. Even just this morning, I had a plan of what my day was going to be like. And then a young person's come to me with this dilemma and it's completely thrown my day off course. But you have to just be there for them and dynamic and deal with it. Do you know what I mean?
And I think that is a brilliant example. You know that saying that all throughout history, kids have never listened to their parents, but they've never failed to copy them. I think that relates to people like in a workplace like this, because, you, for example, you're so many different things to them, aren't you? But one of those things is an example of how to be a human. And you can look at that in sort of different ways. But I think the thing of being nimble and being dynamic in so many workplaces just doesn't happen because there have to be 50 meetings first. And I think being able to do that is such a skill, and like it's something that I really look for. If I'm going to employ someone, initiative and just the ability to change course, because sometimes you just need to. Okay, the oven stopped working. How are we going to do that? Last week, I've got this amazing piece of kit that you've seen, and it just wasn't hot enough in the kitchen to prove the bread. But I knew I have to get the bread in the oven within the next 20 minutes. Or I can't do the sweet potato chips, or I can't do the chicken burgers. So I thought, okay, well, I can use the Iverio, this big electronic pan, as a proving chamber. So I can set it on very low, I can put the bread in there, and that will warm the bread enough so it will prove, so I can get my sort of timings, things like that. I'm saying that because that's something I'm very proud of. It was a really good little trick. But, there's lots of times you need to change course like that. So I think if the kids see you doing that, I think that gives more hope, more possibility for their futures. Because the other thing that I've essentially, although I've done pretty much everything imaginable to do with food, everything dignified, but I've essentially done the same thing. You know, I've worked with food, I've cooked food, and I've written about it, or I've presented about it, I've taught it, whatever. I think it's going to be more complicated going forward for people with careers, because you're going to have to be nimble. You're going to have to change, because what was a career one day is not going to be a career the next, because AI will have taken it over, or whatever. So I think that's a really important thing to see. So, you know, and I think that having that example about is so important.
We always talk about pro-social role modelling at SOFEA, and that's very easy to lose when you're stressed or frustrated, or you've got a contract deadline, or, you know, you've got 50 meals to put out, 100 meals, whatever it is. But it's that idea that in its simplest form, that's like treat others how you want to be treated, right? But our values at SOFEA are about, you know, compassion and respect and treating people fairly. And this idea of pro-social role modelling is effectively like we are bringing in young people who haven't always had the best role models, or have had none at all. You know, kids that have kind of grown up in the care system, children we care for, they haven't had the best role models. And I think sometimes when young people come to us, we're effectively asking them to unlearn everything they've ever known. And we as staff members, as leaders, as mentors and guides to them, it's really, you know, it's a challenging job. And you have the same job now, because you're part of the SOFEA family. So you've signed up for the same challenge. But I think we take it for granted how important those tiny micro communications are. You know, it's not all about kind of, like you say, following the rules and being a role model necessarily, but it's those tiny little things. So be kind, be compassionate, give people your presence, you know, be genuine and be authentic. I think those are things are really important. But it can be easy to lose sight of them, can't it? You know, especially if we're super busy.
Yeah, I think so. And I also think that sometimes it's a good thing for them to learn that right now we have to be courteous, but we have to get stuff done.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay. So maybe I don't have time to sit down with you and have a, you know, one-to-one and, you know, all that sort of thing, because now we have to get stuff done, because that's just a very real part of life.
Yeah, 100%.
I think when I originally saw your schedule for this, you know, you asked me a question on it. What do you like most about SOFEA? I don't think we've done that.
Not yet.
For me, it's the people and the potential. Because in each one that I've met so far, each young person I've met so far, I see something.
And that's where I guess the work and the challenging part of what SOFEA does comes in, because the current societal environment that we've got, like, for example, the catering industry, let's just use that as an example, maybe isn't set up for young people with neurodiverse needs, for example. So we then have a job to be advocates for the young people and try and bring people on board and get to see the potential that these young people have, because it's not always as easy on paper. So if you got a CV of, I don't know, a young person who had a variety of disabilities and mental health conditions, if that was any old work placement, they might not get an interview. But as SOFEA, we can be that advocate. So I think that's really about us being able to shout for the young people and be like, these young people are amazing, and we need to be doing more to create environments and systems that work for them.
I think so. I think that will eventually be the way that it goes. And if we're talking about the catering industry, talking about hospitality, apparently 1 in 8 positions across all of it, it's not just kitchens, but everything, housekeeping, you know, front of house, is unfilled.
1 in 8.
1 in 8. That's such a lot when you think about
it.
You know, and so there are a lot of things, like there's, I don't exactly know where it is, but they reached out over social media. Waste to Taste. So it's a restaurant that's set up to use, you know, waste food, effectively doing what...
Yeah, they're Oxfordshire based, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And so I think there's definitely a place in my head where it's a kitchen, a restaurant, and we could easily do it here, actually, just, you know, where we know what the difficulties are, and we manage that, and we get an end product. But it's when you're going to drop some people into the situations where pretty much every restaurant is understaffed and is highly stressed, and it's just about getting things done. There's literally not the time for the little extra bits.
Yeah, for the differentiation.
But this is changing, huh? this is changing. Like there's been so much talk about sustainability in terms of food, but the talk now is starting to be sustainability in terms of staff.
I like that, yeah.
And I think that's important. But I also think it's important just to work. You've got to work. You've got to put in the work. You've got to, and it's unrealistic and unhelpful to pretend otherwise. And also, it's just great. I talk about, the balance thing. That's different now that I'm older and all of that. But I don't believe in like a work-life balance, because that suggests that one is less important than the other. And I actually had interesting chats with Richard, our CEO, about this, who feels very much the same way. And something that, on a lovely poem my dad once sent me, for professionals, the job is the boss. So it's not about how many hours you do, or it's not about, it's about how you do what you do. But you see, for me, it's no longer the only thing that's important is what's on the plate, but these young people around me and how I can do what I can do with them and how I can shape them. And I'm only here 3 days a week. And I can already see so many different possibilities. So SOFEA, the people and the potential.
Magic recipe. Yeah. It's amazing reflection. I think you're right. I agree with the work thing. I think, particularly in my work, I try to help young people see work differently as well. Yes, it's about the work, but it's about the purpose that you feel from the work. And if it's meaningful work, that's even better.
But I think the point is about the purpose. They talk about longevity, like living longer. Purpose always comes up.
Yeah.
Having a sense of purpose. And meaningful work can be anything. And I think there's a thing in England, I'm New Zealander, but spent a lot of time in France, and I'm I suppose more European than anything else these days. But a lot of people I know who have been incredibly successful started working when they're like 14.
Yeah.
As an apprentice, particularly in the pastry world, and in the kitchen world as well, or don't have qualifications. And I think that there are such a tier of jobs in you could be a doctor or you could be a lawyer, but you can also take pride in a beautifully weeded garden, in a stunningly clean floor. One of my great luxuries in life is to go into a beautifully made bed.
Yeah.
I can't make my bed that nicely. There's lovely hospital corners and all that. And you go in. That's a massive luxury. So someone who can do that for me and can get satisfaction, that's meaningful.
100%.
And this whole sort of tier system of what's important and what's not, I don't agree with it all. So I think, meaningful work can be anything. Saying that, it is amazing, the idea of working for a charity. It does somehow feel very, very meaningful. But I certainly don't want to do down if you've got a good taxi driver who, knows the way and, is polite and the car's clean and all that sort of thing. Imagine how hard it is driving a bus and the sort of disrespect, people go, I got the bus to Headington yesterday and realised the guy's got this computerised thing. He's got to take cash. He's got to take cards. He's got to do it all that way. He's got to go on this little computerised thing. I can't even make my computerised oven work half the time, all of those things, all of that for me is meaningful work. And I think that's a way to encourage people more and more so that they're not held back by the idea of what they're doing is not important. Everything's important or nothing's important.
It's interesting to me that not everybody can have that mindset. And I was just thinking, what does it take to gain that mindset, to be able to see those things? So those micro moments, that purpose is so important. Because it is very self-reflective to do that. And it's so essential, isn't it? But we take it for granted. Like you say, the tiny little things like going into a perfectly made bed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Or even a bed with lovely clean sheets. I got to do that last night. I managed that part. I think it's a opportunity. Just, Ray, who suggested to me going into the kitchen, I never would have considered it. I didn't have a foodie upbringing or anything like that. I never would have considered it. And there were lots of people, Mo at Rockefeller's, Doug and Sal at Inc., Pierre, Grant, David at Pierre's, Alex Shaw at Zeno's. It's all in New Zealand. All of these people I remember because they all gave me something different, and they gave me a form of encouragement, or they gave me a book. My dad, whenever I was interested in something, he would get me a book. We never had any money, so we were always second-hand books, but he'd find me a book, or him and Mum found me a trumpet when I was interested in that. They would, Dad would hide me under his coat, get into a jazz club when I was 7 or 8. Because kids weren't allowed in there.
Amazing.
So I'd go in under his coat and we'd sit at the back in the dark.
Oh, wow.
And then of course he wouldn't have to pay for me either.
Yeah.
There's all, encouraging interest. And I was very lucky to have that. I had a very sort of complicated childhood, but I did have that support when I was interested in things. And I probably had a bit too much freedom, but that's okay too. So I think there's that mixture of opportunity, exposure. And I think the best example that I've seen of that, and again, this is just last week. Now, there's a relatively new student who's an extraordinary musician who's apparently only been going for about a year and a bit, but oh my God.
Yeah, she's incredible.
I mean, extraordinary. And so, and Chris was out there, and of course, Chris gets that going, although he's not the music teacher or anything like that. He's in communications, as I understand it.
He is.
So he's out there, getting that going. Around the corner, Jack and the guys have got someone else, and they're doing all their laptop stuff. There's some, the sports going on with it's either table tennis or the kickboxing, all those different things. There's the English going on. There's the maths going on. I mean, it's extraordinary because my great goal at one point was to have a situation where I'd have reading, cooking, and some sort of physical exercise. I was hoping for dance all together. And then the other day, so Chris, who's the builder, brings in a niece or someone who's a dance teacher. It's constant. There's all these things happening. The other day, I have all this food, left over at the end. It gets, goes out to people who really need it. It's just, it's incredible. It's fantastic. But going back to the work and that, and I think it's the exposure to it, and then someone to encourage them to put in the time that it needs, because that you can't not do and get satisfaction. You can't just go, I'll do a little bit, and it's not the same thing. But again, in terms of the young people, I am learning that from some of them, an hour is the same as 2 days for others.
Yeah. There's obviously lots of lessons learned. I mean, the fact that we're just listening to you talk about all the different kind of cogs that are going on, it sounds like a huge orchestra and we're all playing at the same time. But, it's a new piece of music, if you like. So we are learning lessons about it, aren't we? But yeah, it's amazing to hear your viewpoint of it. And, it's clear to me that the things that have struck me in this conversation with you, Alex, is that you have a real passion for learning, but that learning has looked so different over the course of your life, it seems. And this SOFEA venture is something very different, but it sounds like something you're really passionate about, which is lovely to hear you reflect on, with its challenges, of course.
Yeah, and it's, I've had to adapt a lot. It's a very different, on all sorts of levels. And there's a lot of rules that I have to follow that I've never had to follow before. And, but I think about that in a different sort of a way, actually, like with rules now. And again, this is just about learning to collaborate. There's lots of different people here with different jobs to do. And, you can get cross about it or whatever, or you can just think of it like a sports game. You've got a referee. You've got to follow the rules or you can't play. And I think that's a really key way to look at it. Also, and I keep meaning to ask you for more links about this, you taught me about this mesh in your brain kind of thing and how you can undo that. I do that a lot here in my head, and I do that a lot at home. And for me, that really, really works. That idea of working on your responses and so forth like a muscle, and that has literally been life-changing for me. It's fantastic. And just that sort of realization. I love the idea of personal responsibility, but it's so easy to become set in your ways and set in your kind of mindset and sort of making it's so easy to be cynical. It's so easy to be sarcastic. But if you work, like kind of everything can be a celebration. It's that's unrealistic perhaps, but everything can be a lot more positive, certainly. And it's also having that mindset has helped me let certain things go, which is equally important.
Yeah. It's the idea that I talk about is called neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity, okay.
And people don't talk about it. It's not something you're taught about in school. I only learnt it since being at SOFEA and kind of doing, a CBT qualification. But it's so simple, but it's so hard to do. And that's why you've got to be, like you say, so conscious of the patterns that your mindset's in. But effectively, if you get down to the facts, our brain is a muscle. And if we can train our arms, why can't we train our brain?
I used to do a book about it. Got to, no, seriously, well, whatever in my day would have been a book that you could
Maybe
do
that's
these
a
days.
podcast.
I absolutely think it should be.
Yeah.
I absolutely think it should be. It is. I mean, anyone listening, it's so life-changing. It's actually quite easy to do. And we hooked it up that day with 2 of my yoga moves that I was taught by my yoga teacher to relieve stress. The cactus aeroplane. So cactus, you put your arms back like a cactus and you open out your chest. And then the aeroplane, it's pretty self-explanatory. You go like an aeroplane, go backwards. And I don't necessarily even do it now when I'm being stupid. I just say it. And my partner Lucy and I, we also, certain things, like I'll start to say, be a bit of a dick. And she'll go, right, cactus, aeroplane. And I go, yeah, you're probably right.
But that's because you're making a choice to change. And you just need that moment to make a choice whether you're going to go to cactus or aeroplane. And that's what people, I think, find difficult, but it is possible, is just pause and make a change about how you respond. And that's where all of this thing like compassion and unconditional positive regard comes in. And those are the little things that are important. But we could go on forever. This will be another podcast episode.
Yeah, no, you've got to do that one. I definitely was thinking of that one. Yeah.
So I'm going to bring us kind of to a close. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's actually really nice to hear your story because I haven't heard about your career and how you came to SOFEA in this much detail. So it's really, really lovely.
These are kind of headlines we could go on for a while.
I know.
I'm 52 now.
We'll need a part 2. But no, it's been really lovely to chat with you. I have got one final question for you.
Okay.
If your life was going to be a book, what would you call it?
Keep going. Because so many things that I've tried to do haven't quite worked out. Sadly, my marriage is one of them, which was the thing that I wanted most of all. And then other things, my writing career, my television career, to a certain extent my restaurant career, but I did make a conscious choice there to go into cookery schools. So many things haven't quite worked out, but I've still done okay at them. But I've kept going, and I've kept relatively strong. And I think that is quite an underrated thing in life. We talk about chasing dreams. There's someone who said this, not me. Dreams don't work unless you do. But if you don't keep going, if you don't get up in the morning and keep trying, there's nothing left.
Richard and Judy's #1 bestseller.
There we go. Yeah.
Maybe that could be your next book.
Yeah. Well, maybe it'll have to be.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. A huge thank you to Alex for coming on to the SOFEA Sessions podcast today. As always, if you would like to get in touch, please contact us via our website or social media, and please do like, share and subscribe.